potentially be 10 minutes.
Right, so we need, so I'm saying, so we
Well, we
need
need
two
time.
public hearings, right? So we need one for the
Yes.
budget.
No, the actual Crawford Park is not a public hearing. It's an invitation for public comment. Only local laws in the budget actually require an official public hearing. So I know people use that term interchangeably, but the reality is you're basically inviting public comment
Right.
on a proposed policy at Crawford
So
Park.
I'd like to have that for 7 o'clock.
So
Which
yeah.
The proposed
I
public,
would like to
public
have
comment.
the public comment on the policy at 7
Fine.
o'clock, and then ultimately
The budget at
we can
7:30.
say the budget at 7:30.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right, thank you,
Thank
Mr. Milano. Code of Ethics, Councilman Nioras.
Do I have to stand at the podium?
No.
Please.
So, based upon the outdated code of ethics that we had, we're proposing a new code of ethics that's brought more up to date, if you will. It states behaviors from an ethical perspective that should be incumbent upon officers of the town as well as town employees. It goes through a number of different, there's actually 21 different sections to the Code of Ethics. Goes through disclosure of any interest in any legislation or other matters, what town officers and/or employees should recuse themselves of, investments in affiliated activities or entities that do business with the town, private employment that may be in conflict with official duties, and a number of other things. Rather than going through each one individually, there's at the end of it, there's essentially like a 6-bullet item to kind of identify the standard of conduct for town officers and employees, and I'll just read those, which state that they are to understand and follow the laws and regulations governing our town. They need to be honest, open, fair, and trustworthy in all town businesses and relationships. One of the big ones in this code of ethics is to avoid all conflicts of interest between work and personal affairs. They are to protect town assets, foster a safe, healthy, and productive workplace, and be accountable at all levels for the town.
May I comment, Mr. Supervisor?
Please.
There are a couple of items I think are particularly interesting and important. One, Section 10 prohibits future employment. That would addresses for a 6-month, basically, period in which no one who had been an employee or a municipal officer can appear before the municipality and represent somebody in private employment. And that's obviously something that's never been prohibited here in the town of Rye. In addition, there is a no nepotism provision. Now, I think nepotism is something that's been ingrained in the fabric of the political world in the town of Rye for many years, and I think that this attempts to address that. What it does, it also identifies and provides a threshold for gifts. As you know, there have been many allegations made against town officials in the past about accepting gifts and other gratuities, and we have a aggregate of $150. Which is the threshold, so anything above that would be impermissible to accept for any municipal employee. Now, that also includes dinners, tickets to sporting events. I mean, all of those would qualify as gifts. In addition, what it does address, but not to Mr. Abel's satisfaction, apparently, is it does provide for a Board of Ethics to render advisory opinions to the officers and employees of the town, which must be rendered pursuant to the written request of any such officer or employee. So if the board would like to have a provision where someone other than a officer or employee may request an opinion of the Board of Ethics, we'd have to amend this provision. And I'm not sure if Rybrook does that or not. I don't know if anyone who knows that question. It is a little unusual, candidly, because I have looked at other codes of ethics, to permit non-officers and employees to ask for opinions. But I do think Mr. Abel makes a good point that oftentimes it is somebody from the outside who would be raise the question, is this appropriate or not, and would feel they have no recourse to get an answer without bringing it to, let's say, a council member and saying, can you please ask the Board of Ethics if this is appropriate or not? I would look into that before I made a final determination.
I think it's good too if it's warranted. The unique thing about it is that anybody can then, which may be a good thing or a bad thing, but anybody can then come to the Ethics Board and make a written request that I want you to investigate Hope Vespia.
Right, the potential for abuse
right.
is tremendous.
So what happens then is that then ultimately someone can say, well, Hope Vespia is under an ethics investigation.
Right. The headline invariably will be, Vespia under investigation because some person who doesn't like her wrote a letter and said, I think you should give an opinion. So that's the reason why we do it this way.
Right. So I would like to. It should be there.
Local newspaper, of course.
Maybe there's a way that it can happen ultimately. I don't know, Paul. I would leave it to you and to Miguel Farr.
For the most part, these things are confidential, as well they should be. Although everything is pretty much foilable, so I mean it's very difficult to say that if somebody did raise a question about an officer, an employee, and it was a legitimate question, would it not be foilable with the Board of Ethics? And because everything the Board of Ethics does is open and subject to the open meetings laws. So I think that we could look into this, and they would. Let me look at what other communities do and see how they handle it.
Fall under like a personnel matter?
Well, it might. Yeah, they could go in executive session, but initially, like every other committee, they have to meet in public. So what I would suggest, let me look at maybe what some other communities do and see if there's a provision that might make sense that works that permits somehow that somebody a non-employee could make an inquiry.
I mean, it's certainly clear that whether or not the public can activate the ethics committee really has no bearing on the ability of the public to go to any law enforcement person or any governmental agency with a quote a complaint.
I'm not sure that this relates to criminal activity. I think there are those in a small town. There are always going to be situations, which I'm sure the judges deal with all the time. There are lawyers with local practices who may have clients or former clients who appear before them, at which time they have to recuse themselves. And oftentimes in other courts, the judge will actually disclose that, hey, I did a closing for this man, and if it's an adversarial relationship, he will ask the other side, do you think I can be objective, and I won't recuse myself. So there are situations like that, and I think it would come down to a board member, let's say, voting on something in which someone they know has an interest. And, these can be very tricky situations, and it's really, again, I don't think it relates to criminal conduct, because that is handled by the criminal code, but I do think there are always judgment calls that people have to make when they do that.
How does this policy provide for it?
Well, basically, this proposed law nobody from the public could make an inquiry of the ethics board. It has to come from within.
From the board itself?
No, or anyone in the town, any town employee or municipal officer. So any town personnel could write a letter to the ethics board and say, could you please render an opinion on such and such? Oftentimes, it's a board member asking the board for an opinion about whether they themselves should cast the vote on an issue. I mean, this was recently an issue in Mamaroneck where a coastal zone management commissioner had written to the ethics board after he had recused himself, whether or not he should have recused himself, and he said, if you say I should recuse myself, I will. Ironically, they said he should recuse himself, and then he unrecused himself, which caused another controversy. But the point being that people, board members and/or employees might themselves make an inquiry to cover themselves to relieve any anxiety they might have about doing
But if
so.
someone from the public has a complaint or a concern, clearly they could approach the board.
Exactly, and they would say to you, could you please
Right.
ask the ethics board if this is appropriate,
Right.
which is absolutely fine.
And every month there's public comment, so it
Right.
can be done in a public forum.
That's correct.
So I think that, my initial feedback is I would go with that if there's, if we're not addressing, one of the things we tried very hard is to, be wholly transparent and responsive to the public. We also sit here on a monthly basis and have had some people who have had labor disputes with the town come up, and, and I hate for them to be willy-nilly, throwing ethics complaints to the board. I think you could get a situation where you have a disgruntled employee with a vendetta, and so I think, my expectation is where I would want to see this is basically we receive comments from the public and pass them on to the ethics committee, and I think we could probably handle it in that fashion. But why don't you see what other municipalities are doing?
I have to put this in local law form, and you'd have to have a public hearing before the adoption of a local law. So I would do that probably for January or February anyway.
Good.
I can look into it briefly and get back to you.
It's almost like a conflict of interest board, which big
Yes.
cities have.
Exactly. It's
It's
exactly
that or
what.
an ombudsperson. It's a little of everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. If there's no other questions, comments on that, let's move on to the revision of the dog licensing
There's one
law.
question. What are we doing about the ethics? I mean, we've had a very. What are we going to do? You going to
Well,
rewrite it?
Opinion.
I'm going to look into it. I'll send you a memo if there's any relevant provisions in another code. And then you'll get back to me. And then the next step is I'll put it in local law form and give it to Hope. We'll schedule you'll have to schedule a public hearing for, let's say, the January meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And then once we've done that, we're going to have to go get a whole new ethics board, I guess.
You'll have to appoint, yes, this will supersede the old law. The old law will be null and void, and then you'll have to appoint 5 members of the ethics board.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the new dog licensing law. Town Clerk Vespia?
Right. Last month, we put this resolution before the board, and we decided on increasing the fees for altered and non-altered dogs. But at the same time, the board asked me to do a survey with the surrounding municipalities, and we were very low, and we were still low with the new adoption of the resolutions. So I'm putting forth this revised resolution, which would be $12.50 for an unaltered dog and $20.50 for an unaltered dog would be $20.50, and for an altered dog, $12.50. Also, Councilperson Gelfar mentioned if we had the option of doing a 2-year license rather than a 1-year license, and I'm proposing that we do the 2-year optional also, if someone would prefer to do it that way, but at a reduced price, which the city of White Plains is doing, where it would be $17 for an altered dog for 2-year license and $27 for an unaltered dog for a 2-year license. So I'm putting this before.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for
And
that.
see what,
Any questions,
how you feel
comments
about it.
from the board?
My only question is, does the 2-year option have to be put in resolution form, Mr. Noto?
No?
Okay.
I
know, I figured it. You wanted to
Doesn't have
go
to
with
be.
it, I would add it in,
You
right.
can put it in resolution.
Just wondering if it needed to be there.
The 2-year
I
fee,
can
that's obviously a deep discount. Do you think that it would be appropriate to bring the altered to 20 for 2 years and unaltered to 35 for 2 years? I don't know if the board has any opinion on that. There's still savings there.
Right.
What are you currently proposing for 2 years? Where is it?
For the 2-year
Okay.
option, 20
I see
for
what you
altered,
mean.
35
That was originally one, we were proposing a $10 and $18. So,
Yeah, I would
It would be
I would
wise
feel
to-
comfortable maybe 20 and 35 or something like that. I don't know what the board thinks.
We could live with that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Okay, so if we
after,
could amend that.
Seaport Tester charges $12.50 and $20.50, and I don't know if there is going to be a point in time where we're asked to collect for them and do the licensing. So I figured after I
Keep
did
it
the
the same.
survey, yes.
I think that's
I
great,
changed it so that.
considering
we
that the
agree with them.
municipalities